Hey friends, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. I'm Greg Nettle. I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our vision is for every child on the planet to have a church. We do that by helping you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. Wow, this is an amazing episode of the Church Planting Podcast. My good friend and brother Jason Lantz is our special guest. Jason actually took over River Tree for me when I transitioned into leadership at Stadia. He took River Tree from 4 campuses to, I believe they have 9 campuses now. I just cheer for him all the time. He's formed networks of churches to do church planting all over the place. He's a church planter himself. What a delight to have Jason Lantz on the Church Planting Podcast. So it's my absolute pleasure to have my dear brother in Christ, dear friend, Jason Lantz on the Church Planting Podcast. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Greg. Glad to be with you.
Man, Jason, I've known you a long time, straight out of college. You are one of the young men that I am most proud of in life. So thanks for doing just such a great job for the kingdom. Man, you're a church planter. Talk about that.
I am.
Talk about your church first. Let's talk about the first church plant where you were the actual church planter.
Okay. Yeah. So River Tree Christian Church is where I'm at. And that's the church I started right out of college. And right around 2007 or so, the town that I already lived in just really felt like God wanted me to be there, like to spend my time there, to invest there. And so you and I had conversations, we talked with the team, and I was sent from River Tree as a Living Link missionary to start a new church in Canton. And, you know, that church was really, I think, a great partnership with River Tree because it was in proximity, maybe 25 minutes or so away. But we had the chance to innovate a lot of things, disciple making, missional communities, inner city ministry, but also have the relationship back with a lot of more suburban churches in River Tree that had a hunger to serve. So I felt like that church planting experience was both great for us, but the connection from the sending church was huge.
Yeah, it was great for River Tree as well. So Jason, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think this is a model that could be used more often, especially in urban context. The reason so this is back in the days when I was senior pastor of River Tree. You're coming straight out of college. And if I remember right, we hired you to do student ministry. And do you remember how much we paid you when you came on staff?
It wasn't much. No.
I think we gave you housing and the salary was zero. And that's one of my, best hires of my life.
That house, by the way, got torn down. So
well, that's because you're gonna trashed it anyhow. I know it needed torn down. Hey, but let's go back to this because we're trying to brainstorm. River Tree's not going to reach into downtown Canton, into the city. It's just not going to do it. We can't put a campus down there because it's so different from our central location. And so, you come up with the idea of what's it look like to be a Living Link missionary and plant a church in Canton. So talk about some nuts and bolts of what that looked like to be a Living Link plant.
Right. And, that was kind of the real mission of our church. It was called Love Canton. And it really was about living out the lifestyle of a disciple of Jesus where you live. And I really think that, part of the thing that we ask our pastors to do now that I learned in that time was you need to be the lead missionary. Like if you're the pastor, yes, you have the job of preaching every week. Yes, you have to lead a staff. You got to do all that stuff. But your lifestyle is leading the way for what you want everybody to do, which is to wake up in the morning and to say, I'm a missionary to where I go to work. I'm a missionary to the coffee shop I like. I'm a missionary to my kids' ball team. And so a lot of our mission with the church plant was that. It was forming frameworks and disciple making opportunities for every person to wake up and say, I'm a missionary. And yes, we did meet in gatherings and stuff, but the whole premise, the whole point, the fire behind everything was this thought of I'm a missionary for Christ when I wake up in the morning.
And I loved the name of the church of the church plant was Love Canton. But this idea then, I believe if I remember right, so River Tree as kind of the sending church we committed to, I don't remember if it was paying your full salary for 3 years or do you remember?
It was half of it. So
Okay.
River Tree funded, half the salary to get it going, and then I raised the rest. And just like a typical church plant, any planter has to raise seed money to get going, and then over time, all the people that were committed, made it sustainable.
Okay, and so I just wanted our listeners to hear that and viewers to see
Right.
that there's this other model where that really was a healthy model of church planting for a suburban church to take a leader and send them into an urban context and give you stability that you
Yes.
may not have if you're going in just on your own to plant.
Well, and once again, the relationship between Love Canton and River Tree, it provided stability for a church plant in the city, but I think it also gave opportunity for a group of people at River Tree that really wanted to serve, but they didn't know who to trust and they didn't know where to go. And so there was a whole lot of connection going with nonprofits, schools, that we were meeting in town that, we could be the connector between the two.
Okay, now I'm just going to be real transparent here, Jason, before we move on to River Tree today. But the other thing that had to die within me, Greg Nettle, is this isn't like I'm starting a campus down there and we get to can't count this in
Right.
our numbers, right? This is a kingdom advancement. And
Yeah.
it's that transition of realizing, hey, it's not about building my own kingdom. It's about building God's kingdom and releasing, one of your best multiple leaders into the urban context so that God's kingdom can grow. And so I think that's an important context for those leading those churches out there today, thinking about
Yes.
doing something like this. Hey, Jason, okay, now fast forward, and I transitioned to Stadia almost 10 years ago, something like that today.
Yeah.
And, you become the senior pastor of River Tree as a whole.
Yeah.
And, okay, so when I left, River Tree had, I think we had 4 campuses, if I remember right. And, so kind of give us the snapshot of where River Tree is today under your visionary leadership.
Sure. So we now have 8 churches. And then we have what we call partner churches that are not under our governance, but it's more than just, high fiving from a distance. Like we're really strategically partnering together. And we're in, Canton, Ohio, Hall of Fame city. But we really feel like in this area that Jesus is doing something really special and that it has a lot to do with the relationships of all of those pastors at those churches working together for the sake of a bigger thing. So our hope, our dream is that, 8 churches reproduces to 16, reproduces to 32, like it's this multiplying effect at every level. So with groups, we want those to multiply. With individual missionaries, we want that to multiply. With church planting, of course, we want that to multiply. And then with networks of churches. So what we're finding with this is you may have 3 or 4 churches in a certain geographic area, and it's actually better for them to work together to plant a church, to multiply a group, to send a missionary. So I feel like we're really getting a chance to play, and it's really been great in different contexts within about a 30-minute drive. But it's about multiplying church.
Okay. So much to unpack there, richness that we want
Yeah.
to learn from you. But, I just want to, I was reading this morning in my daily reading time about the disciples coming to John the Baptist and saying, hey, there's this other guy who's baptized and everybody's going to him. And John responds in the New Living Translation as he says, I'm going to celebrate every good thing that he does. He must become greater. I must become less. And I just want you to know, Jason, that's how I feel about you. I will celebrate every good thing that you do, because at River Tree, man, you had to become greater. That was my biggest dream and hope for you as I became less. And you've done that. But as I'm listening to you, one of the transitions you made is, when I left, I said, yeah, we have 4 campuses. You immediately, when I asked you about River Tree today, you said, yeah, we have 8 churches. Words make worlds. So talk about the
Yes.
fact you're not calling them campuses. So
Yes.
why? What's going on with that?
I think that if you're really going to give people the vision that they're a missionary, then you got to give them the authority, not just the responsibility. And when you call somebody a campus, there's nothing wrong with that. Technically, I guess they are. Some of them are campuses, but
Yep.
the pastors have the authority, not just the responsibility to say, this is my church. This is my town. These are my people. Like Jesus has called me to lead them. And I'm not going to just have the weight of responsibility for the staff and the money and all the stuff. I have the authority to do that from God. And so there's a high accountability there. But what we're finding is that if you tell someone they're a missionary and you're going to call them to have this big responsibility to live that way and lead the way in an area, you got to give them the authority too. And sometimes the thought of campus, there's nothing wrong. It's just a name.
Yeah.
But it comes with it, this connotation of, well, you're just managing somebody else's thing. You're just managing someone else's vision, someone else's values, someone else's vehicles that they want to do. And I really believe if you want to see a movement for Christ, it's not just about one person's vision. It's actually about a whole bunch of very gifted, talented leaders that have the room to run, but also want to be a part of a bigger thing than themselves.
What's the benefit of being part of a bigger thing than themselves?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, when you taught me this, you don't want to be always the best leader in the room. Surround yourself with people that are better than you are. So what you realize the more you do this is like, hey, I'm really good at this, this, and this, but there's a whole lot of things I'm not.
Absolutely.
So one of the huge benefits on our pastor team is like, there are people that are so much better than me at what they do. And so when they lean in and they give those gifts to us, it makes everybody better. So, there's a lot of things to manage there with your time and energy and how much you put to things. But when we're in meetings, some of our best ideas didn't come from me. They came from our pastor team, and everybody in the room knows what they're great at, but they also know where they're not. And so they get the benefit from the rest.
So let me ask you this. So do you like, I'm thinking of some of your churches that you have that have come about since I've been gone. And do they still carry the name River Tree, or do you even give them freedom to name appropriate to their community?
So some of them do, and some of them don't. Yeah, that's up to them. That's what I mean. It's like when we look at a called pastor, called missionary, the first thing a missionary is going to do is say, well, what's the uniqueness of the people that I'm called to be in?
Yeah.
So I'm always asking those pastors, you tell me, where's your town? Where are your people? Where's your school system? Where's your grocery store? And they live there and they know that context. So in some of those contexts, to have River Tree's name is great. For some of those contexts, it might actually be better if it was called something else. So to us, like, we give a lot of freedom around those things. It really is up to the leader.
Okay. So how are you deciding, you've been a great Stadia partner. You are a great Stadia partner. Where are you
Yeah.
deciding you're going to launch the next church, if you will?
Well, it's a lot of relationship. At this point, we kind of know what we want in a lead pastor, what the competencies are and the giftings are and all that stuff. Once we meet that person, we'll do residencies with them. And so we have some space for them to get here and to be here with us. And then there's a relational process of kind of exploration. Like, what are the towns that, they feel most called to live in, to start a new church? And so a lot of it is over time, a back and forth of where that is. And, we just brought a resident on the team. We use Stadia's discovery process to, filter through the right people. And, already they've kind of narrowed it down to a couple of towns that they think we think God might be calling us to start a new great church right here. And so when it's time to send them, maybe it's 12 months, 24 months, maybe even more than that. It's custom, but they'll get to pick the town they're in.
Okay. And let's shift now from kind of the network of River Tree churches, if you will. You
Yes.
mentioned, but there are these other, what you call partner churches. Talk
Yeah.
about that network a bit.
So, I'm sure a lot of people listening, if you've done ministry in an area for a while, I mean, you know who's there. You know the other pastors, you know the other players, you know the leaders in the area. And, relationship is how God works. And I really believe that the kingdom of heaven moves through friendships. So we're all leading organizations. We're all, stewarding different organizations. We all can't do everything all the time. However, it's our genuine friendship that's going to make the kingdom of heaven happen. And so that's what I was just noticing, in an area. I've been in the same area for 20 some years.
Yeah.
And, there's some great pastors here, great pastors. There's some great principals, superintendents, business leaders, nonprofit leaders. And it really is our genuine friendships with each other that fuels the other stuff. So, so some of these pastors, we basically were like, hey, I trust you, you trust me. We're not necessarily the same. Our churches are different in a lot of ways, but let's do something. Like, let's not just say we're doing something, like, let's do something. And so those partner churches are based on people giving money and time and leadership time, relational chips. It's customized again. So through that friendship, you say, hey, what do we want to do together? So we've shared staff together. We've sent residents to plant churches together. We've worked on initiatives with, school systems and basic needs around the area together. So I think that concept of just the kingdom moves through friendships. I would say to anybody listening to this, who are the people where you're already friends? Because you already have the thing that I believe God uses. God says to us, I don't call you a servant, I call you a friend, because I'm making known to you like my master's business. So you're my friend now. If we actually operated like that with each other, I think we would get a lot more done. But we're so protective of our organizational things that, we can add some things here and there. But I really think if you want a movement, it's got to come through friendship.
Okay. And what's been most fascinating, I've watched this in you as long as I've known you. You have been able to connect and build friendships. I mean, you're a white guy, and it's a surprise. And I'm watching you, and you have been able to cross socioeconomic and ethnic, racial boundaries to build those relationships as well. Talk a little bit about the intentionality of that.
Mm. So, I learned this in a group I was in with, it was a multiracial group. So we had Hispanic, Black, white, old, young, like a group of pastors. And one of the pastors said, we're going to move at the speed of trust. We're going to move at the speed of trust. So one of the biggest things with that is like, if you're going to a meeting for a purpose, like, hey, we want to pull off this cause, or we want to plant a church, or we want to give money to this thing, and that's the only time you talk, you're not going to build trust. You're just going to have your guard up with like, how much do they want? What do they need from me? And how is this going to benefit me? And there's something like that happens. That's how there's relationships. But what I've found, especially crossing into deeper intimacy in relationships with people that are different, is that trust is everything, and it takes time. And so when you truly go into a relationship and it's genuine, you listen more than you talk. You get to know them maybe when there's no agenda there. Man, that builds trust so well. And Greg, you taught me this, like, experiences build trust.
Yeah.
So then let's say you go on a trip together, or let's say you go to a conference together, or let's say you do this thing in your area to plant a church together. That experience accelerates it. So I just know that over time, like, no matter what background you're coming from, trust is the currency, and you can't rush it.
I'm just so proud of you. The wealth of wisdom you're sharing right now is just so rich, Jason. Now, So my wife and I and our family, we moved away from the River Tree area just over a year ago, and moved an hour north, like right into the city of Cleveland. And
Yes.
it was time for us to move out, and we had specific reasons to move into areas of diversity where we wanted to let God expand our lives and so forth. But I get up here, and there's like all this River Tree influence up here, and all this Jason Lantz influence up here as well. So like I'm thinking of a guy like Andy Sikora is leading this amazing church up here,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like you're in deep relationship with Andy an hour north. Talk about that, because we're
Yeah.
talking about networks, and
Yeah.
how's that happen?
Andy's my friend. I love Andy, and I know he loves me. And we have had multiple, experiences. We planted our churches at the same time. We were in a lot of the same spaces, but over time, sometimes we talk about work stuff, staff stuff, things we could do together. But sometimes the phone call is just about how we were doing, our marriages, our friendships, how we were doing that, just all that stuff, kids stuff. And then, there's intentionality with it. So, I haven't seen Andy for a while, to be honest with you. I miss him, but I know that if he and I talked right now, we could pick right up right where we left off. And I know that in his networking in Cleveland, that's how he runs his network. So like attracts like, you know what I mean? Like when you are in a group like that, where you're like, this is the real thing, man. Like these guys are doing it. They are on mission with God, and they're genuine and they care about me. You're going to invite people that that want that into that group. But if you don't believe that's there, you won't do it. So it's like this snowball happens, like attracts like, whether it's good or bad. And I think with Andy, it's a great example. Like God's using him in a huge way to build the kingdom in Cleveland. But in some ways, he kind of started a network where now there's probably multiple gatekeepers that are either inviting people in or keeping people out because he set the DNA.
Yeah, Andy's just become a great friend up here, and he was just in our home with like a group of 16 Cleveland leaders just not too long ago, and we
Yeah.
were all dreaming and praying together about what the movement of God in Cleveland, and
Yes.
that's largely the movement of God that Andy, has been putting together with all these other leaders that was here long before I got here, but that you were involved with long before Andy launched up. It's just really fun to watch how those networks of relationship and how you keep them going and nurture them. Okay, let's come back to River Tree now. 8 churches. I just know you. I've shared time with you. So talk about the next. We'll do 3 years. What's God doing? What's the vision?
Well, I really believe that over I'll give you the next 12 months.
Okay.
We know that we're supposed to mature so that we can scale. And I think there's some very specific places where, just like in a family, you want your family to grow up. You want the kids to go to the next grade, that you want them to do well. I feel like we are right there where there's some churches where if they would grow healthy in a few ways, that we're going to see not just addition, but multiplication. Like I really believe that. So in the next 12 months, we're doing that strategically. We're building a couple more pillar churches. We're going to get our goals to get 3 more residents on the bus, to plant 3 new churches. We have some collaborative mission we're going to do together to really kind of try to unlock student ministry. It seems like something we can't figure out right now. And then just in general, Greg, I just really feel like the connection between like-minded churches in other cities, is going to happen. So I think it's taken some time, but I can see it. I think in Canton, Akron, Cleveland, Youngstown, there's some really called people in some really great churches there. And I think, I don't know if it's 3 years or what, but it's going to happen.
Well, Jason, I was, my dream has always been for Northern Ohio to become a great light for Jesus. And nobody's going to remember Jason Lantz or Greg Nettle or Andy Sikora. That doesn't matter. People are going to say what happened in Northern Ohio, and we're going to say Jesus is there and being lived out through the local church. And, it's just, I want people to hear this, because I'm watching you an hour south of Cleveland. I'm watching Andy Sikora up here in Cleveland with this whole group of leaders. I was just on a Zoom call today with Sean Kelly over in Youngstown, who is,
Yeah.
planting multiple churches. And man, I'm just wondering, if
Mhm.
we could bring this whole region together. It just seems
Yeah.
like that's something that God's up to right now. I'm here. This is what we do. We cast vision together when you get like-minded people together, right?
Greg, I want to just say, I really believe that it's regional church movements that are going to change the world. So
Unpack that a little bit.
yeah, so I think in any city, in any context, you've got stuff that's big and global, and you've got stuff that's super neighborhood and local, and those are all good. But there's a widening gap that I really believe needs filled with the local church. And it is those regional church movements that say, we're going to take a county for Jesus. Like, we're going to strategically plant churches in this specific region. And then we're going to link arms with like-minded other organizations, businesses, churches, schools that have the same thought. So I just see it in the West in general, with like the landscape seems to be changing, but I think that the power of a regional movement where you've got enough money and people to really do something bigger than yourself, but you've also got enough local where there's genuine relationship. I think it's the perfect combination of what people are looking for.
Okay, so let's keep vision casting here and brainstorming this,
Yeah.
because, one of the things I'm most excited about, in the future, I mean, we need multi-modalities of churches, right? So you guys work with, Andy Sikora works with Lumar Vargas here in Cleveland. Lumar is a completely bivocational church pastor, planting a Latino church. It's, reaching 150 people a year in. She's crushing it. We're going to need lots of Lumar Vargases, right? To reach
Yeah.
the communities. And then you have all these micro churches that people are trying to figure that out. And the hardest thing about that is, you can't, unless you're leading a major micro movement of micro churches, you're never going to get a salary from that. So,
Right.
what if we, as we put these regions together, could actually go, how can we support the Lumar Vargas's bivocational? How can we provide accountability and overhead for this movement of micro churches so that they don't have to, have structures and buildings and, create theological documents necessary, all that stuff, but with doing it all within the region, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm just lifting up the idea that you're saying that could be this
Mhm.
beautiful vision for a
Mhm.
whole community who wants to start new churches together and multiply.
So, Greg, I love that thought. Right on. It's the working together of all of these different churches, no matter what the size or modality. But I think we've got to pull it down to the individual. So you've got hundreds of people, say, sitting in a church, and they hear a vision like that, and they think, "Oh, that's great." But their first thought is, "How can I throw money at it?" And I think what we need to do is switch that around and say, "No, here's your part in it." So, one of the classes that I teach to try to mobilize people is called the 12. And it's a very,
Yes.
very simple
My
thought.
wife went through that with you.
Yeah, it's a very simple thought. It's, if you want to change the world for Jesus, ask Jesus to show you the 12 people you're supposed to love in an intentional way in the next 12 months. And when we do this class, maybe there's 20, 30 people in the room, right? But then you just show them on their phone, 25 times 12. That's actually a pretty good sized church.
Yeah.
If we would just simply do what Jesus did. So I would really say, like, it's simpler than we make it, and we've got to pull it down to the individual level. And you could say that to a student. I could say it to my teenage kids. You could say that to a mom who's home with her kids. You could say that to a business person, no matter how influential they are. I would say, who are the 12 relationships that the Lord wants you to walk with in a special way? Like, just love them, just walk with them. And, it's something I learned from you and many others, where they're like, you want to multiply yourself. And the truth is we multiply who we are. So I'm going to multiply not just what I do, but who I am. So the more that I'm like on fire for Jesus, that DNA is going to get into people. And then you just simply say to them, who are your 12? So, and I mean, we know, like, Jesus, like, knew what he was doing. And that's how he changed the world. So I think that on an organizational level, yes and amen, everything you said. But I don't want to have a hollow organization that just does that there. It's like the key is actually the grassroots piece. The person that's so on fire for the Lord that they're like dangerous. And they're like, I'm the only one that is going to reach these 12 people. And so, it makes it doable, right? It's, oh, okay. They're probably already in my life, right? So
everyone listening to the Church Planting Podcast, you see why I love Jason Lantz so much. Jason, thanks for being our guest on today's episode of the Church Planting Podcast.
It's great to be with you, Greg. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.